Imagine a place where billionaires sleep soundly, their fortunes untouched, their secrets locked away behind walls of silence and steel. A city so clean, so orderly, that chewing gum is illegal but moving billions of dollars overnight? That's just business as usual. In the heart of Asia, a tiny island nation has quietly transformed into the world's most impenetrable fortress for wealth. A place where the richest of the rich send their money not just to grow it, but to shield it from prying eyes, hungry governments, and even the chaos of global markets. Here's a fact that might surprise you. In 2023, more than $2 trillion in private wealth flowed through Singapore's banks. That's more than the entire GDP of most countries. And yet, most people have no idea how this happened, or why Singapore, of all places, became the ultimate safe haven for the world's elite. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a story few have ever heard. This isn't just about money. It's about power, secrecy, and the incredible rise of a city-state that went from a struggling port to the most trusted vault on Earth. We'll uncover the secret deals, the bold decisions, and the hidden networks that turned Singapore into the Fort Knox of the 21st century. If you think you know how the world's money moves, think again. Because what's happening in Singapore isn't just changing the lives of billionaires, it's quietly reshaping the global economy. And whether you realize it or not, it could affect your future too. So buckle up, because by the end of this story, you'll never look at a bank, a passport, or even a city the same way again. To understand how Singapore became the world's safest tax haven, we need to rewind the clock. Picture the 1960 seconds. Singapore was a struggling, newly independent nation, barely more than a dot on the map. The streets were crowded, the people divided by language and culture, and the future was anything but certain. The world's financial giants London, New York, Zurich looked down on Singapore as just another colonial backwater. A place with no natural resources, no oil, no gold, and no reason for the world's wealthy to pay attention. But Singapore's leaders saw something different. They saw opportunity in adversity. They understood that if they couldn't dig wealth out of the ground, they would have to build it from scratch. The stakes were enormous. Failure meant poverty, instability, even irrelevance. Success meant survival, not just for the government, but for millions of ordinary Singaporeans who dreamed of a better life. Fast forward to today, and Singapore is a gleaming metropolis. The skyline sparkles with the glass towers of global banks. The streets are filled with luxury cars and lined with designer boutiques. But beneath all that shine, something even more valuable is flowing: trust. In a world where financial scandals and government crackdowns are making it harder and harder for the rich to hide their money, Singapore has become the last redoubt. A place where privacy is protected by law, and where the rules are clear, predictable, and ruthlessly enforced. Why does this matter? Because the way Singapore built its financial fortress didn't just change its own destiny, it changed the rules of the global game. Today, governments everywhere are scrambling to keep up, and ordinary people are left asking, who really controls the world's money? And what happens when the safest place on earth for wealth is also the hardest to see inside? At the heart of Singapore's transformation is a man whose name you might not know, but whose vision changed the fate of millions: Lee Kuan Yew. Imagine a leader who was part philosopher, part street fighter, and part chess grandmaster. Lee was born into a world of colonial rule and war, but he dreamed of something bigger, a nation that could stand tall among giants. He was tough, sometimes ruthless, but always driven by a single, burning ambition: not just to make Singapore survive, but to make it thrive. Of course, Lee Kuan Yew didn't do it alone. He surrounded himself with a team of brilliant, pragmatic minds, people like Goh Keng Swee, the economic architect, and S. Rajaratnam, the diplomat who shaped Singapore's global image. Together, they were like a startup team facing impossible odds, betting everything on a bold idea that trust, order, and discipline could be more valuable than oil or gold. But these men were not superheroes. They faced doubts, sleepless nights, and the constant fear that one wrong move could send the whole country spiraling into chaos. Lee himself was known for his sharp tongue and iron will, but also for moments of deep vulnerability. He once admitted that he cried alone in his office, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of responsibility. He worried about his people, about the future, about whether he was making the right choices. Their struggles were very real. They had to convince a divided, skeptical population to believe in a vision that seemed almost impossible. They had to fight corruption, win the trust of foreign investors, and create a system where the rule of law was absolute. It was like trying to build a luxury hotel on quicksand, with the whole world watching, waiting for them to fail. But Lee and his team were relentless. They made hard choices, sometimes unpopular ones, always with the same goal: to build something that would last. And what they built was more than just a city. It was a brand, a promise, a sanctuary for anyone who valued safety, stability, and above all trust. The real turning point came in the early 1970s, when Singapore made a decision that would change its destiny forever. The world was in turmoil. Wars, oil shocks, and political upheaval were shaking the very foundations of the global economy. In the West, governments were tightening regulations, making it harder for the wealthy to move their money freely. Banks in Switzerland and the Caribbean were under pressure, and the world's elite were searching for a new, safe haven. Lee Kuan Yew and his team saw an opening. They realized that Singapore's greatest asset wasn't what it had, but what it could offer: absolute stability, strict confidentiality, and a government that would never bend to outside pressure. In a bold move, Singapore rewrote its banking laws, making them some of the most secure and secretive in the world. They invited foreign banks to set up shop, promising a level playing field and ironclad privacy for their clients. Picture the scene: international bankers flying in from London, New York, and Zurich. They step off the plane into the thick, humid Singapore air, skeptical but curious. Inside sleek, air-conditioned government offices, deals are struck over cups of strong local coffee. The message was unmistakable. Singapore was open for business, and it would protect its clients at all costs. This was more than just a policy shift, it was a gamble. If it worked, Singapore would become a magnet for global wealth. If it failed, the nation risked becoming a pariah, accused of enabling money laundering and tax evasion. But Lee and his team were willing to take that risk. They believed that if they could build a system grounded in trust and transparency, at least within their own borders, they could attract the world's most powerful clients. And so, almost overnight, Singapore began to transform. The first wave of foreign money started to flow in. With it came a new era of prosperity and a new set of challenges that would test the nation's resolve like never before. But with every fortune comes a shadow. As Singapore's reputation as a financial fortress grew, so did the scrutiny. The world's wealthiest families, secretive corporations, and even controversial political figures began moving their assets into Singaporean banks. The city's gleaming towers became home to fortunes that spanned continents. Some earned, some inherited, and some shrouded in mystery. With this flood of wealth came a new set of challenges. International watchdogs and rival governments started asking tough questions. Was Singapore becoming a haven for dirty money? Was it helping criminals and tax evaders hide their loot? The pressure mounted and the stakes grew higher with every passing year. Inside the government, fierce debates broke out. Some officials worried that Singapore's hard-won reputation could be destroyed overnight by a single scandal. Others argued that the nation's very future depended on staying the course, on being the one place where the world's elite could trust that their money would be safe, no matter what storms raged outside. Then came the first real test. In the late 1980s, a major international investigation threatened to crack open Singapore's banking secrets. News broke that a notorious dictator had stashed millions in Singaporean accounts. The world's media descended, hungry for scandal. For a moment, it looked like everything Lee Kuan Yew and his team had built could come crashing down. But Singapore didn't flinch. Instead, the government doubled down on its commitment to the rule of law. They launched their own investigation, cooperating just enough with international authorities to show they weren't a rogue state, yet refusing to betray the trust of their clients. New regulations were introduced: strict anti-money laundering laws, rigorous background checks, and harsh penalties for anyone who broke the rules. It was a delicate balancing act, and the world watched closely. Would Singapore cave to international pressure or stand firm? The answer came in the form of a quiet but unmistakable message. Singapore would play by the rules, but on its own terms. It would be a fortress, yes, but not a fortress for criminals. A haven, but only for those who respected the law. And as the dust settled, Singapore's reputation emerged stronger than ever. The world's wealthy took notice. If Singapore could survive this storm, then maybe it really was the safest place on earth for their money. But as more and more wealth poured in, the risks and the rewards only grew. The true test of Singapore's resolve came in the early 2000s, when the world changed overnight. After the 9/11 attacks, global governments launched a relentless crackdown on secretive banking. The United States and Europe demanded transparency, threatening sanctions against any country that refused to open its books. Switzerland, once the gold standard of banking secrecy, began to buckle under the pressure. Suddenly, the world's wealthy were running out of places to hide, and all eyes turned to Singapore. Would it follow Switzerland's lead and surrender its clients' secrets? Or would it stand alone, risking isolation, but preserving its hard-won reputation as the world's safest vault? The stakes could not have been higher. Billions of dollars were on the line. The world's most powerful people, tycoons, royals, tech moguls, waited anxiously to see what Singapore would do. Inside government offices, the pressure was intense. International phone calls, urgent meetings, late-night strategy sessions. The future of Singapore's financial sector, and perhaps its entire economy, hung in the balance. Then, in a move that stunned the world, Singapore charted its own path. It agreed to cooperate with international authorities on terrorism and serious crime, but refused to become a puppet of foreign powers. Instead, it doubled down on its core values: strict regulation, zero tolerance for corruption, and absolute clarity in its laws. Singapore would not be a playground for criminals, but it would remain a sanctuary for legitimate wealth. The result? A flood of new money poured in. As other havens faltered, Singapore's banks became the new gold standard. The skyline soared higher, and the city-state's influence on global finance reached unprecedented heights. For Lee Kuan Yew's successors, it was the ultimate vindication, a moment when Singapore didn't just survive the storm, it emerged as the undisputed champion of financial security. But every victory comes at a price, and the world was about to learn just how high that price could be. In the aftermath of Singapore's bold stand, the world's financial landscape was forever changed. The city-state's banks became synonymous with safety, discretion, and efficiency. Billionaires, multinational corporations, even entire royal families shifted their assets to Singapore, trusting its laws and its legendary discipline. The economy boomed, and the people enjoyed a level of prosperity and stability that became the envy of the world. But this newfound wealth came with its own set of challenges. The cost of living soared. The gap between rich and poor began to widen. And some Singaporeans started to wonder, had their country traded its soul for success? Was it right to build a society on the secrets of the world's elite? Or was Singapore simply playing the game better than anyone else? For the government, the lesson was clear. Trust is the most valuable currency of all. But trust is fragile, and it must be earned every single day. Singapore's leaders understood that one scandal, one misstep, could bring the entire system crashing down. So they doubled down on transparency, on accountability, and on the relentless pursuit of excellence. The price of being the world's safest tax haven was high, but for Singapore, it was a price worth paying at least for now. Today, Singapore's influence stretches far beyond its tiny borders. Its banks manage trillions, its laws set the standard for financial security, and its passport is one of the most powerful in the world. In an era of global uncertainty, pandemics, wars, political upheaval, Singapore stands as a beacon of stability. The world's elite still flock here, seeking not just safety for their money, but a sense of order in a chaotic world. But the questions that once haunted Singapore's founders still linger. Can any country truly balance secrecy with responsibility? Is it really possible to be both a fortress for wealth and a force for good? As governments everywhere crack down on tax havens and demand more transparency, Singapore walks a razor's edge, trying to protect its hard-won reputation without losing what made it special in the first place. And what about you? If you had the chance to protect your family's future, would you do whatever it takes, even if it meant keeping secrets from the world? Or would you demand a new kind of honesty, even if it meant risking everything? Singapore's story is far from over. In a world where trust is rare and secrets are currency, this tiny nation has built a fortress that even the most powerful envy. But every fortress has its cracks, and every secret has a price. What will happen when the world's spotlight shines even brighter on Singapore's hidden wealth? Will it adapt? Or will the walls finally come down? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Would you trust your fortune to Singapore? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your ideas, because the next chapter is only just beginning.